Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 12 Dynasty wide receivers for the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my top 12 Dynasty wide receiver rankings. We begin at number 1, and in my opinion, the number 1 and number 2 guys, you might want to flip-flop. Maybe someone might have the guy who I ranked number 2 as number 1, but these are clearly the top 2 guys. At number 1, we have Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings, 23.6 years old, wide receiver number 2.5 PPR points per game last season, playing in 17 games, having 184 targets, 10.8 per game, ranking first at the wide receiver position, 128 receptions, 7.5 per game, ranking number 1, 1,809 receiving yards, 106.4 per game, number 1, and 9 total touchdowns, number 4 at wide receivers. So obviously, Justin Jefferson had this super year, right? One of the best wide receiver seasons that I have ever seen. He had so many yards that he almost broke the Calvin Johnson Megatron receiving yards record on a season. Anytime a player averages over 100 receiving yards per game, they had a fucking incredible season. All of this done with Mr. You Like That, Kirk Cousins under center. So now maybe we fast forward. Maybe your Dynasty League lasts 5-6 years. A couple years down the line, maybe Kirk Cousins isn't there. But that argument kind of is stupid if you're making the argument that Kirk Cousins helps Justin Jefferson, because while Kirk Cousins isn't awful, he's a pretty middle-of-the-road quarterback, and if Justin Jefferson's able to put up those numbers with Kirk Cousins, imagine the numbers he would put up with a better quarterback. Dalvin Cook seems to be going on the way out. I understand Hawkinson is an excellent tight end, but Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, he's kind of playing pretty bad as well. Justin Jefferson is amazing. He's the key focal point in this offense, the number 1 piece in this offense, and you better believe Justin Jefferson is going to be able to succeed for at least the next 10 years. So Justin Jefferson, to me, is the wide receiver number 1 in Dynasty. At number 2, though, you could make an argument here that this guy is better than Justin Jefferson. We got Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals, 22.9 years old, pretty similar in age. Both obviously played at LSU. Wide receiver number 5 and half PPR points per game, 12 games played, 134 targets, 11.2 per game, 14th, 87 receptions, 7.3 per game. Number 12, 1,046 receiving yards, 87.2 per game. Number 16, 9 total touchdowns, same amount as Justin Jefferson, number 4 at wide receiver. Now, the reason why some people make the argument that Ja'Marr Chase is better than Justin Jefferson, that you should be taking Ja'Marr Chase as the number 1 wide receiver off the board, is because Ja'Marr Chase is linked hand in hand with Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, whatever the hell you want to call him. And Joe Burrow, in the opinion of most people, basically everyone who's not a Vikings fan, Joe Burrow is much better than Kirk Cousins. He is linked to an offense that should be sensational for the next at least couple of years, right? We all saw Joe Burrow lose to the Chiefs. People talking about the game rigged, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow are going to be just as good next season. They are going to be great. The only argument against Ja'Marr Chase that you could make is Ja'Marr Chase truly the 1 in his offense, or is it a 1A, 1B scenario with him and T. Higgins? And I'm closer to the argument that they are a 1A and 1B. Now, again, this isn't shitting on Ja'Marr Chase and saying that Ja'Marr Chase is unskilled, he's bad or anything. because that would be a crazy argument to make. But ultimately, I do believe that they're the 1A, 1B in this offense. That's why I have Ja'Marr Chase at number 2, just slightly behind Justin Jefferson. At number 3, I think there's a bit of a tier break, if I'm being honest with you, between the number 1 and number 2 guy and then going to A.J. Brown. So at number 3, we got Philadelphia wide receiver A.J. Brown, 25.6 years old, wide receiver 7.5 PPR points per game. This season, 17 games played, 146 targets, 8.6 per game. Number 8, 88 receptions, 5.2 per game. Number 11, 1,496 receiving yards, 88 per game. Number 4, and 11 total tugs. Number 2 at wide receiver. Those are some Deshaun Watson level tugs. So when it comes to looking at A.J. Brown, we have another guy that is pretty similar to Ja'Marr Chase in terms of the situation that they are in. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is looking on the up and up. Some people shit on his kind of passing accuracy or how good of a passer he is, but ultimately, A.J. Brown and Ja'Marr Chase are comparable because they are both in a scenario where the number 2 option on their team, it's really a 1A, 1B, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Again, this is not to dance on the parade of A.J. Brown. It's just to state how good Devontae Smith is. A.J. Brown, this offense is looking incredible. They should have a great offensive line yet again next year, and there's really no reason to believe that going forward, A.J. Brown doesn't have top 5, top 3 wide receiver upside, so he is my number 3 wide receiver in Dynasty. At number 4, we move to CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, 23.8 years old. The team fired Kellen Moore yesterday, the day before that. Mike McCarthy might be calling plays. That doesn't sound the best, but ultimately, even with the woes of Dak Prescott all season, throwing a million fucking interceptions, CeeDee Lamb was still able to feast and was clearly much better with Dak under center compared to Cooper Rush, wide receiver 8.5 PPR last season, points per game, 17 games played, 156 targets, 9.2 per game, number 4, 107 receptions, 6.3 per game, number 4, 1,359 receiving yards, 79.9 per game, number 6, and 9 total touchdowns, number 4. And even with the changing of guard, going from Kellen Moore to Mike McCarthy, calling plays, even with Dak Prescott seemingly shitting the bed against the 49ers and having multiple down games all season long, CeeDee Lamb is one of the most talented wide receivers in the National Football League. And as long as Dak Prescott is there, I know people like to make fun of Dak, and you know what? It's warranted at times. I make fun of Dak as well, because it seems like every time they get to these big games, the collapse happens. Just seems like it happens every year. But ultimately, CeeDee Lamb is still an amazing receiver in a good situation. It's hard to kind of cut out some type of argument here, O.J. Simpson style, cut out some argument here that would tell you that CeeDee Lamb doesn't deserve to be a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty. I frankly do not see a way to argue that. Now, next year, will he be a top 5 wide receiver guaranteed? No. But you draft him because for the next 10 years, he's 23 years old, he should be a top-end wide receiver. At number 5, we move to Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions, going up against, not going up against anyone. I don't know why that was on my head, because normally when we do these rankings videos during the season, it's Detroit versus whoever. Going up against no one, obviously. 23.2 years old, wide receiver number 10.5 PPR points per game, 16 games played, 146 targets, 9.1 per game, number 8, 106 receptions, 6.6 per game, number 5, 1,161 receiving yards, 72.6 per game, number 10, and 6 total tugs, number 20 at wide receiver. Now, obviously, there are going to be people that shit on Jared Goff, but I honestly think Jared Goff is going to at least be the quarterback for the Lions next season. I think he proved that he is good enough to do that. This Lions team, while for years, even with Matthew Stafford, the Lions were a complete and utter dumpster fire. Every year, a lot of people would try to talk themselves into the Lions, right? Like, maybe this is the year the Lions figure it all out. Maybe this is the year that the Lions win a playoff game. This year, they were knocking on the door of the playoffs. Knock, knock. Obviously, that didn't end up working out, but they won their game in Week 17. They beat the Packers. They just got screwed because the Seahawks won. So now we're looking at a Lions team that looks amazing. A team that just got rid of their number 2 playmaker during the season. They got rid of TJ Hawkinson. So I know they have Jameson Williams. They have DJ Chark, who they may or may not bring back. Amon-Ra St. Brown is clearly the key piece in this offense, especially if Swift doesn't look like the same guy kind of like last year. Now, do I think Swift is going to be elevated back to his normal role? Yes. Yes, I do. But we know the role of Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a guy that's going to see 8, 9, 10 targets in every single fucking game. And I know people are going to make fun of Jared Goff, but it's not like Jared Goff is stuck there forever with the Lions. Dan Campbell seems to be righting the ship for this team. I'm really excited about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I honestly wanted to rank him higher, but I think it's fair to have him at number 5, especially since in 2021, going into the season, no one was on their knees given the gawk 9,000. No one was banging the drum for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I certainly wasn't. And by the end of the 2021 season, he was looking like, ooh, this top 12 dynasty option, but do you want to draft him there? Was that a fluke? Then we see 2022, he's great again. I'm not worried about Amon-Ra. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, though you can make an argument between these next couple of guys with Amon-Ra St. Brown who you want to have ranked higher. At number 6, we got my guy, Jaylen Waddle away, waddle. Jaylen Waddle away, waddle, till the very next day. Bum, of the Miami Dolphins, 24.2 years old. Wide receiver number 13 and a half PPR points per game, 17 games played, 116 targets, 6.8 per game, 24 wide receiver, 75 receptions, 4.4, 23, 1,356 receiving yards, 79.8 per game, number 7, and 8 total tugs, number 11 at wide receiver. So obviously this year was, if you look at the stat sheet, if you pull up the game log, it looks like a roller coaster ride. It's up, it's down, it has its peaks, it has its lows. They have these exciting games where Waddle's hitting the fucking waddle in the end zone, like up against the Buffalo Bills in the snow game. As a Dolphins fan, that shit made me metaphorically ejaculate, and also not metaphorically, because I really did. It was so exciting. And obviously, we had the games with Skyler under center, with Teddy Two Gloves under center. Today, as I'm recording today's video, February 1st, Tua Tagovailoa has cleared the concussion protocol. Obviously, spending a month in the concussion protocol isn't great, but everything I have read from the doctors is telling me that Tua's going to be good to go next year. Tua is not more prone to concussions than anyone else. I've also read Tua's going to wear whatever the top of the line helmet is. He's going to learn how to fall in the offseason so he doesn't bang his head on the ground as much. If Tua can play next year, puts up 15 plus games, right? That's not what he did this year. If he plays 15 plus games, there's no doubt in my mind that Jaylen Waddle can't be a top 3 wide receiver next season or going forward. Tua was so efficient last season. Now, I know people make fun of his arm, blah, blah, blah. Sure, he doesn't have the Josh Allen, the Patrick Mahomes fucking cannon of a right arm to his lefty, but you get what I mean, right? He doesn't have this cannon of an arm, but Jaylen Waddle doesn't need some 50-yard deep strike to score a touchdown. We saw it against Green Bay. We've seen it against these teams. You throw the ball 6 yards in front of you, this motherfucker takes the defense, puts them in a spin cycle, and takes it to the crib. Jaylen Waddle is one of the best, most talented wide receivers in the NFL. There's a reason he was drafted so highly in the NFL draft 2 years ago. I love Jaylen Waddle. I love him. Another guy, like with Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Jameson Williams should be good, but I don't think anyone's sitting here like Jameson Williams the clear 1B to Amon-Ra. Jaylen Waddle's the 1B to Tyreek Hill. The thing is, Jaylen Waddle is much younger than Tyreek Hill, which gets him this spot at number 6. If you guys have ended up enjoying this far, again, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. At number 7, we move to Garrett Wilson of the New York Jumbo Jets, 22.5 years old, wide receiver, 31.5 PPR, points per game, tied with Hollywood Brown and Mecole Hardman, 17 games played, 147 targets, 8.6 per game. Number 6 at wide receiver, 83 receptions, 4.9 per game. Number 16, 1,103 receiving yards, 64.9 per game, 14th, 4 total touchdowns, 37th. Now, last year, or 2022, so technically this year, last year, whatever the fuck you want to call it, it was a weird season for Garrett Wilson because this guy had to play with Zach Wilson. He had to play with Joe Flacco, Cool Joe. He had to play with Magic Mike White. A rotating cast of quarterbacks for Garrett Wilson. Next year, look, I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And I think it would be idiotic for me to just go ahead and lock one of these names in and say that's the quarterback. It's not going to be Zach Wilson. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be Derek Carr. It's going to be one of these quarterbacks that is talented. It's going to be one of these quarterbacks that is good enough to throw the fucking rock to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are a dynamic duo that forms an Eiffel Tower over defenses and relentlessly fucks them into the night. Garrett Wilson, I'm a Jets hater. I hate the Jets as a Dolphins fan, but I keep things in fantasy football as normal as possible, right? I don't try to have any bias in fantasy football. And while I wish that Garrett Wilson was a complete and utter bust, terrible, garbage, he is the opposite. He's amazing. And what he did this year with these subpar quarterbacks tells me how great he could be if the quarterback was just somewhat competent, if the quarterback is Aaron Rodgers, if it's Derek Carr. If it's Carson Wentz, then you might as well burn the fucking place to the ground. But if it's one of these quarterbacks that has just an inkling of skill, Garrett Wilson, his ceiling is the moon. But what keeps me not having him ranked higher is because, look, it really is tough to rank Garrett Wilson when you don't know who the fuck the quarterback is. Like, I know Jaylen Waddle's quarterback's Tua. I know Amon-Ra's got at least Jared Goff for one more year. I know Lamb's got Dak. A.J. Brown's got Hurts. Cincinnati Bengals receiver Jamar. He's got Joe Shiesty. Justin Jefferson, he's got Kirk Cousins. Who does Garrett Wilson have? We don't know yet. But I don't think that should really make you panic. At number 8 to close out the top 8, then we're going to pivot to a different graphic for our wide receivers 9 through 12. Number 8, we got my guy, Titty Boy, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals, 24 years old. I don't remember if I mentioned Garrett Wilson's age. He's 22.5 years old. He is younger than me. That is always crazy to figure out. When I started making these videos, I was like 19 years old. Now I'm 23. I'm going to be 24 in May. It's a little different now. It's a little different now because the players are now younger than me, which is very weird. Very, very weird. So, number 8, T. Higgins, 24 years old, wide receiver, 19.5 PPR points per game last season, 16 games played, 111 targets, 6.5 per game, number 26, a wide receiver, 75 receptions, 4.4 per game, 23rd, 1,042 receiving yards, 61.3 per game, 17th, and 7 total touchdowns, 14th at wide receiver. I think at this point is where you kind of put the tier gap. Now, you could say Jefferson and Chase, tier 1, A.J. Brown, Lamb, St. Brown, Waddle, Wilson, Higgins, all in the same tier 2, or you can knock Higgins down into tier 3, but I'd consider Higgins to be a tier 2 wide receiver as well. Again, number 1B to the number 1A of Jamar Chase. If anything was to happen to Jamar Chase, knock on wood, T. Higgins elevates into superstardom. There's not anything really to poke a hole in T. Higgins' game. T. Higgins is incredible. We even saw it in the playoffs this year. T. Higgins is really incredible. He's an incredible player. This is a team that, despite the fact that their offensive line continues to get beaten and battered every single fucking year, feels like T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, these guys are able to excel past their offensive line, getting Joe Burrow molested behind the offensive line. So T. Higgins, another guy that I really like. At number 9, this is kind of where the new tier starts for me. We got DK Metcalf of the Seahawks, 25.1 years old, 27th in half PPR points per game last year, 17 games played, 141 targets, 8.3 per game, number 11, 90 receptions, 5.3 per game, number 10, 1,048 receiving yards, 61.6 per game, 15, and 6 total touchdowns, number 20. DK Metcalf, in terms of if you were creating a wide receiver in a lab, you are forming what the best wide receiver would look like in the NFL, the prototype NFL wide receiver, the alpha, you're going to get DK Metcalf. The guy looks like he is sculpted like one of those Greek fucking statues with the tiny cocks, if you've ever seen those things, with the leaf over their cock. You know what I'm talking about? DK Metcalf looks amazing. Pause. DK Metcalf is an animal. He's amazing. He's amazing. His only issue is that he's probably stuck with Geno Smith now. Look, Geno Smith had a good year this year. I'm not trying to just say that Geno Smith sucks cock, right? That Geno Smith is this awful quarterback, because that's what I thought going into last year, and that was blatantly wrong. I felt like a fool, buffoon, an idiot. But ultimately, when we're going into 2023 and to infinity and beyond for the next couple of years with DK Metcalf, how sold am I on the quarterback position? Not amazingly sold. That's why he's at number 9. But again, the touchdowns kind of fucked him. He only scored 6 touchdowns. If he scores 10 touchdowns, he probably finishes much higher at the wide receiver position. At number 10, we move to Chris Olave of the Saints. Second year now, 22.6 years old. This was his rookie year. Last year, 25th in half PPR points per game, tied with Debo Samuel. 15 games played, 119 targets, 7.9 per game, 20th at wide receiver, 72 receptions, 4.8 per game, 26th, 1,042 receiving yards, 69. Very nice. 0.5 per game, 17th at wide receiver, and 4 total touchdowns, 37th. Another guy where the quarterback situation is pretty bleak in New Orleans because we don't know what's going to happen. Now, the Saints just got a first-round pick from the Broncos for trading Sean Payton, so maybe we end up with Chris Olave having a brand new quarterback. Maybe I don't think Jameis or Andy Dalton are going to be back. Bad year quarterback for Chris Olave, but you saw the flashes on the field, right? When you read these stats off, when I read stats off, you also have to keep in mind what the fuck the eye test tells you. When you were watching Chris Olave play football this season, you weren't thinking, oh, this guy is just some middle-of-the-road wide receiver. If you're starting 3 wide receivers on your team, he's the number 3 wide receiver on your team, right? In fantasy football, no. What you're thinking is, this guy has the upside to be the number 1 receiver in fucking fantasy football. He's the number 1 wide receiver on my fantasy team, right? That's what he could be if Dennis Allen, now this is something that I talked about all year long last year, all season. Dennis Allen needs to get his head directly out of his asshole and figure things out, because why? Like fucking that NSYNC song, but it's bye. You get what I'm saying though. Why is Jameis on the bench? Why is the red rifle Andy Dalton under center? Make it make sense. And I sat there and I started thinking, Nick, what is happening? And I had no idea. Taysom Hill was playing quarterback. Was Jameis fucking really that hurt? I don't think so. Frustrating for Olave, but his future is definitely very bright. At number 11, we move to Tyreek Hill of the Dolphins, 28.9 years old. Tyreek gets the bump down to wide receiver 11 because he's older, right? We don't have 10 more years of Tyreek Hill. Now, is that a bad thing necessarily? No, but you got to understand that in Dynasty, age plays a factor. It's not like redraft where, oh, Tyreek will be 29 next year. Should be fine. But what does Tyreek look like at 33, 32, you know? It's going to look different. So wide receiver should look different realistically, but you never know. Tyreek, the freak himself, might be just fine at 33 years old. Wide receiver number 3 in half PPR points per game, 17 games played, 170 targets, 10 per game. Number 3 at wide receiver, 119 receiving yards, 7 per game. Number 2 wide receiver, 1,710 receiving yards, 100.6 per game. Number 2, 9 total touchdowns. Number 4. If Tua played the whole season, I genuinely think Tyreek would have been the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. I just believe that. Now, Tyreek himself says he can put up numbers with Skyler. He could put up numbers with the reporter, I think is what he said. That was asking him the question, right? Of course, Tyreek believes all this. But at the end of the day, if Tua was healthy, Tyreek would have been even better. He could have beaten the record of Calvin Johnson. 1,700 receiving yards. He had over 100 receiving yards per game again with fucking Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson playing multiple games. So you better believe if Tua can stay healthy, the upside for Tyreek is a ton, but we all know how good Tyreek Hill is. So it would be stupid for me to sit here and waste fucking 10 minutes getting down on my knees, 50 Shades of Grey style, and fucking sucking this guy, slobbing on his knob, right? There's no reason to do that. Same thing with number 12 here. We got Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams, 29.6 years old. We know how good Cooper Kupp is. Wide receiver 1 in half PPR points per game, 9 games played, 98 targets, almost 100 targets in 9 games, 10.9 targets per game, 34 wide receiver, 75 receptions, 8.3 per game, number 23 at wide receiver, 812 receiving yards, 90.2 per game, 33rd, and 7 total touchdowns, number 14. The guy is nothing short of incredible. Fantastic, amazing, whatever word you want to use to describe the best receiver, or one of the best receivers in the NFL. Problem is the age. He's almost 30. He's going to be 30 next year. The quarterback is also up in the air. Nick, Matthew Stafford's going to come back. Okay. But what does he look like in 2023? Because last year, he looked like a dead man walking. Looked abysmally bad. And I was a big Matthew Stafford guy. I was banging the drum. I was like, oh my God. Matthew Stafford finally in a great situation. Blah, 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 blah. He won the Super Bowl in 2021. Blah, 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 blah. He's going to be amazing. We saw what happened. So I'm not trying to shit down the throat of Cooper Kupp because, again, he's so good. John Wofford could be the starting quarterback and he'd be good. So still like Cooper Kupp, wide receiver, number 12. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think. Did I miss someone? Nick, why is Deebo Samuel not up here? There's going to be questions. People are going to be like, Nick, why is X player not up here? That's okay. Where's Devontae Smith, people said. It's fine. Let me know down below what you guys think. I love you guys all so much. I really do appreciate you guys. I hope you all have a great guys' day. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Go Dolphins, baby. Just kidding. Who cares about the Dolphins? It's, actually, I care. But let me know your Super Bowl prediction as well. Eagles, Chiefs. Right now, today, I'm taking the Chiefs. Got to see the injury report, though, by next week. Because there's a lot of injuries to the Kansas City Chiefs. Love you guys all again. Have a great guys' day. As always, good boy.